Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari and today's vlog is basically a week where I'm focusing on reading Black authors for Black History Month. Now, I said this at the end of my last video, but I'm going to repeat it here again because there's absolutely no guarantee you even watched my last video. If you did, thank you. If you didn't, hey, I got other videos. Go check them out. Anyway, enough advertising myself because that feels weird. But you should be reading diversely year-round. Don't just read Black authors during Black History Month or on Juneteenth. Read Black, POC, LGBTQ+, and other diverse authors all year. It is literally February, and it's supposed to snow, and one of my neighbors decides to mow their dead lawn right now. We're gonna pause the video and I'll come back and talk about the books as soon as that stops. The mowing's done, but Captain down here has decided to join us, so you're gonna get weird grunty breathing noises. These bulldogs. That's just what they do. For this week, there's no real rhyme or reason to what or how I'm going to read other than focusing on Black authors. I have 3 books from my Dungeon of Books TBR that definitely need to be read this week. So these are the first 3 books I'm going to focus on. I have Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. It's literally a history of racism, which is probably a very important thing to read during Black History Month. Then I have a memoir, Fire Shut Up in My Bones by Charles M. Blow. I don't really know what this is about other than I've had it for years and it's a memoir. And then I have Dread Nation, which this is fiction, and it is a reimagining of the Civil War, but there's zombies. So this one sounds super fun. Once I get through these 3 books, I will just randomly pick other things off of my probably physical TBR, but I'm not sure I'm even going to limit myself to physical TBR, just whatever I want to read by Black authors, and I promise you there are tons of books that fit that description. So let's jump into it right now and start reading. Let's do a book update because I'm currently reading 4 books at the same time. Unrelated to this video, I've been reading a chapter of In Our Backyard every single day, and just gonna tell you now, this is gonna make my worst books of the year list. So I wish I could DNF it, but all 4 of these books are on my Dungeons of Books TBR for this month, and I can't DNF any of them without taking a punishment. And let me tell you, my punishments are not nice, so we don't want the punishment. Next up, I've been reading Dread Nation between like the 3 other books, which are all nonfiction. So this is kind of like my chill book. I'm going through it slowly, mostly because most of the time is on the nonfiction. Just when I get frustrated with them or my brain hurts, I switched to this one about halfway through. Super enjoying this so far. And then Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi. I'm about halfway through with it, a little over halfway through. I've been listening to it as an audiobook, so I don't have a bookmark in here, but comprehensive is how I'm going to label this so far. We'll talk about it more when I'm done, but overall extremely well written, and it just covers a lot of stuff. Finally, the book I finished that took me forever to finish is Fire Shut Up in My Bones by Charles Blow. Now, this is a memoir. I picked this up back in like 2019, 2020, I don't exactly remember, and it was part of a group of books that I purchased from a Black-owned bookstore, and it was kind of just like a bundle of a bunch of books by Black authors, like recommended by the bookseller. So I didn't like purposely pick this out for myself because I don't typically do memoirs by people I don't know. Like occasionally I will, but typically no. Additionally, since I've owned this book, I've determined that I really can't stand to read children being abused. And the absolute main plot point of this book was that this man was raped at 17 by his cousin, and he divides his life into before and after that event. So that's pretty much the most you can get into child abuse, and I kind of knew going into this that I wouldn't like it, and I honestly should never have put it on my TBR, because like, what was I thinking that I was gonna finish this? I put it on here because it's short, and I was like, oh, even if I hate this, it's only 200-ish pages. It's like 210 pages. Like, I can get through that, even if I hate it. No, that was a horrible freaking idea. This man is like a news reporter, like a written news reporter for the New York Times. And the entire idea of him writing a memoir, I believe, was to be inspirational. He grew up very poor. He was a mama's boy, and his mother always made sure they were fed, but they really had nothing much else. He dealt with sexual assault. He dealt with struggling with his sexuality. He dealt with like straight up abuse. And then obviously racism and homophobia, as you expect from a black man born in the 70s. And the idea is that even though he's faced all of these hardships, he's still managed to be super successful. While amazingly well written, this man professionally writes. I'd hope it's well written. It's super lyrical. It just gives me a look into a single person's life instead of like a broad overview of people. And then the single person is not somebody I've literally ever heard of. Like, I know he writes for the New York Times because it says it on the back, but I've never heard of this man. I do not care at all about this man. And then his life sucked. At least what he tells us in this story, he has not had a nice life. The book itself is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Well written, and if you care about him or know who he is, or just generally like reading memoirs, especially from like a perspective that's not your own, because like, I'm obviously not a black man born in the 70s. Like, this is a perspective that I've never experienced. It could definitely be for you. It's not the kind of content I like to consume. So I'm going to leave this unrated because it wasn't bad, and in any other circumstances I would have DNF'd this, which would have meant it was not rated. Reading two nonfictions that you absolutely hate at the same time makes for a rough reading time. So hopefully, now that I've finished that, I only have one chapter left in this, hopefully my reading will pick up. And other than this, everything else I have to read is fiction. So hoping to knock quite a few more books out soon. So I finally finished Red Nation, but it is towards the end of this week. I have been just straight up overwhelmed this week. I've had so much extra work to do with like work. I've had this big project due at work that's been eating up most of my time, and I haven't been able to read. And when I do have time to read, I mostly just want to rot my brain instead. This is really the only thing that I've had to look forward to as far as reading all week, and it's good, but it was dark. It's a combination of entertaining and educational because it's alternate history. Basically, during the Civil War, the dead rose at the Battle of Gettysburg, and the war ended and slaves were freed because they needed all of the living to work together to fight the dead. But it hasn't gone so well. Our character was born 2 days or 3 days before the dead rose, and she's a teenager, I would say 16 or so in here. The US has established residential schools known as Indian schools, and instead of sending Native Americans to them, well, they are doing that, but in addition, they're sending black children to these schools to learn how to fight to protect their white counterparts. Our main character is going to kind of like a combination finishing school and fighting school because she is being trained to be a bodyguard for a white wealthy young lady. And for most of this book, we follow her in that situation. Now, these Indian schools really did exist, and a lot of the racism and events and different things that the characters in this book are experiencing really did happen, which is why a story like this, where it's entertaining with the whole zombies and fighting zombies thing, is good for young readers because they get educated about a lot of things that might seem too dry if you're reading about it in like this type of format. If you have a teenager or a young adult or even yourself and you like YA stories and you want to be a little bit more educated about specific racisms post-Civil War, I think this is a really good way to do that while also being entertained by the zombies. I'm not usually like the biggest YA fan, like I don't hate it by any means and I read it on occasion, but this was really, really good. Like I enjoyed reading this for both the entertaining and educational purposes of it, and I'm definitely going to pick up the second book in this series. I don't know if it's a duology or if there's like another book coming further down the line, but for right now it's at least a duology. Again, I want to say thank you to Jamie for sending this to me for my birthday, I think. The note says birthday and Christmas are like days apart, so who knows sometimes. But thank you, Jamie, for sending this to me for my birthday. I very, very much enjoyed it. You have amazing taste, and let's see what else I can maybe read. So I don't have a whole lot of time left before this vlog needs to go up, but I am almost done with this. I have like at 2 hours left of the audiobook, maybe, so I will definitely finish this. It's going really well so far. Ibram Kendi is an amazing writer, but I will talk about this more in a little bit when I get to it. And then I have 2 other books that I'm thinking about reading. I'm not sure about this one because it's also about American slavery. This is, I believe, pre-Civil War, and it follows a young girl who slave owner father sexually assaulted her mother, and then I think our main character is like sold, yeah, she's like sold away from her mother. So probably educational and probably well written and probably great, but probably also really depressing. And then this one is a murder mystery that takes place in Ghana. So I think I'm gonna try this one because it sounds like it'll probably be less sad, and I don't want to be sad anymore. All of the books that I'm reading this week are sad. And I didn't do that on purpose. But Black history is fucking sad, y'all. Final update, I did finish 2 more books. Let's start with Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. This is, as it says on the cover here, a definitive history of racist ideas in America. This is the history we should have learned in school. Or the few things in here that we did learn in school without racist coding to make white historical figures more palatable. Due to the vast amount of racism covered in this book, this is like a starting point for your anti-racist journey. If you're just starting to work on your anti-racist activism or whatever, you've read maybe a book or 2, you've read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and you kind of want to know where these racist ideas came from. You want a history of how racism started in America, how it keeps continuing in America, what is forwarding this racism that we just can't seem to get past because it's largely ignored among many other reasons. I think this is a really great starting point. Read this book and then from here you can take individual historical events or individual ideas and then do a deep dive on those ideas. So I'm getting to this a little bit late. Almost everything in here is stuff that I was already aware of. Unfortunately, there was a couple of things that was new information to me, or maybe things that I just hadn't retained from like earlier explorations into like anti-racist ideas, but I do think this is a fantastic read. Dr. Kendi is an amazing author, and he really gets to the point of ideas in a way that is easily understood while still being like powerful in its execution. He also doesn't sugarcoat things. While we see a lot of like white historical figures being made to look better, if like a black historical figure in this book has done something inappropriate or wrong, even by modern standards, he will point that out. It should be noted that this was published in 2016, so there's not really much of anything past 2015 as far as racism goes. So there's like a glaring absence of anything Donald Trump related. And he speaks well of Cosby in here, when he probably does not any longer. So just know anything that happened after pretty much 2015, you're not going to find in here, and it's because this was published in 2016, not because he's purposely leaving it out. Additionally, I listened to this mostly as an audiobook. The audiobook is great. It's not narrated by Dr. Kendi, but the narrator did a very good job. Pick up the audiobook if this is too much for you to read. There's also a version of this for teenagers that I read quite a few years ago, that if you don't feel like this is to your level of reading and you want something simplified for a younger audience, maybe for yourself and you prefer YA, or for your children, pick that one up because it's equally as good. And it's funny because it was co-written with Jason Reynolds, who makes history amusing. Additionally, I also finished Wife of the Gods by Quay. This was also very good. Also rated at 4 stars. This is a murder mystery that follows a detective in Ghana. Now, this is the first book in a series of detective novels following the same detective, and in this one, a young woman is coming home from like work. She's like a student, but she's doing volunteer work. She's coming home and she's murdered. The detective is obviously trying to figure out like who done it. I want to say I'm gaslighting myself into thinking that I like murder mystery because this is the second one I've read this year and I've rated them both highly, but I really think I'm just gaslighting myself. Like, I don't like murder mysteries. I did not particularly care about the murder mystery part of this book. Like, I was glad that I couldn't guess the murderer, but once we figured out who the murderer is, it was like, oh, I see where the clues were to tell us that person was the murderer. I get it. It wasn't like a ton of red herrings, but it was enough red herrings that made it interesting. But overall, like, the murder wasn't the interesting part of this story for me. What was interesting was the look into like superstitions and religion and like the magic of Ghanaian culture. The Wife of the Gods, that is the titular part of this, is that the young woman is found by a woman who, as a teenager, was given to a fetish priest as a sacrifice to help with a curse to her family. And that is like a big like talking point, sticking point of this story, is this fetish priest has a lot of teenage wives. And you have like the cultural war of people who really think that these women are wives to the gods because they are curing their family of their curses. But then you have people with like modern westernized thinking where they're like, hey, this is really fucked up and you shouldn't be giving all these teenage girls to this creepy old man. Obviously I'm Western and I'm on like that side of the story, but I also recognize like the cultural aspects of this. And so you kind of like are circling this situation with the priest and with a couple of other characters who are doing somewhat shitty things, or potentially shitty things, as well as a alternate mystery where the Detective Dawson's mother has gone missing from this same area years prior. So is this woman's murder related in any way to his mother? Is his mother even murdered? Like, did she just run away because something like really shitty happened right before she went missing, which I'm not going to tell you because it's kind of a spoiler. And you have all these questions. I also thought that Detective Dawson was a pretty decently cool guy. Like, he's generally a good person, but a flawed good person. And I liked him as a character. So I don't think I'm going to go in and start reading like a shit ton of mysteries, and I don't know that I'm even going to continue with this series itself because I don't care about mysteries, but I did enjoy this book, and if you are a mystery reader, I highly recommend picking this up. So there you go. And that is the end of the video. I'm done. I did not get nearly as many books this week as I wanted to, just because of all the work stuff that was going on, and it was not a good reading week for me. Unfortunately, I can't continue this vlog because you guys needed a video today, but next week I will have my TBR for March up, and we will find out if I actually managed to finish all the books on my Dungeons & Books TBR from last month or not. It's not looking promising. Yeah. I don't want a punishment, so I'm going to try my hardest, but it is not looking promising. Anyway, stay tuned for that next week, and I'll see you then. Bye.